on council for Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. It is after 1 p.m. Our agenda has been published and is before you. Item 1 was a call to order. Item 2 is public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, please come to the lectern, give your name and address, and you have 2 minutes, and you will hear from the staff when your 2 minutes are up. So if you would give your name and address in 2 minutes, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi.
Let me see. Let's get the mic on.
My 2 minutes hasn't started yet. Did y'all all get my handouts? Please tell me you have them. Thank you. All that's documented that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to start by saying Benjamin Franklin said that any society that will give up a little freedom.
We need your name and address.
Oh, Jackie Klingenberg, 1266 Hogan's Alley, and I live here in Mount Pleasant. Benjamin Franklin said that any society that will give up a little freedom to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. Using authority from threat or mandates and not by consent of the governed is the weakest level of leadership. I want to remind each of you, we are on day 193 of 15 days to flatten the curve. We peaked on April 18th, and we have declined since that date. There's been no more spikes. The CDC, I'm going to not use the mic, hopefully you can hear me. The CDC said 94% of the deaths had other illnesses or issues. And I'm not to discount the deaths, but do we know that 90% of them were actually in nursing homes? And they are being treated by medical professionals wearing a mask. And you're asking us to wear masks, and we're healthy. And if you look on your handout, and I don't have them for all of you, but it clearly states on any mask you purchase that it is not going to protect you from this virus. It is not. And it states it. It's a false security. And I know some of you have said, oh, but the doctors use them. Yes, I've already observed today, taking it off, putting it on, pulling it down, pushing it up. The doctors use them, they scrub up before they put them on, and they throw them away after a procedure, and they scrub up when they take them off. Now, are you really asking the general public to do that? That's really not the way it works. And there's no asymptomatic spread hardly at all. And I've given you the study. It only happens in a household.
Ma'am, it's your 2 minutes, please.
Huh?
Your 2 minutes are up.
Again, I'm urging y'all, take a leadership role, not a dictatorship role. We do not want to be masked, and they're not protecting us.
Good afternoon. My name is Hope, Koestner. I reside at 213 Cassie Court in Ladson, South Carolina. Wear a face mask or do without. That is what the current mask ordinance means. To those of us that have medical, psychological, or religious reasons for not being able to cover their faces. Even with the well-thought-out exemptions your town has put into place, people are struggling daily with not only rude stares and silent judgments, but more importantly, people are being denied entry into businesses such as stores and restaurants to provide for their families. As someone with a medical exemption myself, it is very hard for me personally to go out and risk being met with resistance that only exacerbates the condition that I have on a daily basis. I'm only one of many. Most people are afraid to leave their homes and have just made their decision to stay home and try to hide from the rest of the world. They'll order their deliveries. They'll go along with the procedures that have been set in place to help them not have to go into public, but it affects them physically and psychologically. Business in your town is down for a lot of people because of me. People like me. There are so many of us. I'm certain every one of you has already made up your decision how you're going to vote on this issue today. And if you haven't, take what the people are saying to you on both sides. Excuse me. I do plead with you today to allow current data logic, and concern for the people you are elected to serve help make this decision. For both the emotional and physical well-being of your citizens is in your hands. Thank you.
How you doing, guys? Thanks for having us. And my name is Lawrence Tisdale. Live at 1535 Trumpington Street, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. I'm a proud member of this town and moved here with my family. This place is the greatest. But this mask ordinance, I've had a really tough time with it with my kids, getting mask shamed. I mean, I worked as a New York City police officer for 21 years, and, you know, I don't want to really get into that, but the shame that my family felt, my little kids felt, these women and these men looking at them and whispering at them, why don't you have your mask on? That's disgraceful. This is America. And, you know, the data, people keep saying about data. Please, we beg you for data. What the mortality rate? What is the mortality rate of an under 70 person? What is it? Can we please have this? Because I've seen data that, like this young lady said, 6%. Come on. That's of all the cases in the United States. We're shutting down this entire country for this? I mean, I'm just asking you to please, this mask shaming has got to stop. It's heartbreaking for me, and it was really hard for me to look my two boys in the face and say, this is what's going on in this country right now. And I just wanted to thank you very much for hearing us, and thanks very much for what you do.
Thank you for hearing us today. My name is David Varner. I live at 2792 Carolina Isle Drive here in Mount Pleasant. I just want to plead with you to drop this ordinance or do not renew it. This is a good time. Everybody keeps saying follow the data, follow the data. Well, months ago, Brave Doctors came out via social media to sound the alarm that the data was being skewed. They were being asked to do unprecedented things and code deaths that were multiple reasons as just COVID death. This is insane. I mean, there is a political agenda here. Let's not pretend there's not. This is all about mail-in voting. This is all about an election. But this is not the way we handle elections. This is not the way we should deal with voting issues. If you want to vote, vote. But we shouldn't be mandating and scaring the crap out of everybody so that they feel like there's an emergency that's not really going on. We know now that only 6% of the reported 168,000 deaths were due to COVID-19 only. That's approximately 9,600 people. And we're talking about in a nation of 321 million. Out of those 9,600 people, almost half of them, or roughly half of them, were deaths in a nursing home in New Jersey and in New York, where those governors took COVID-positive patients and put them in an elderly care facility of all places. So if you scratch those people out, you know, that means that basically 0.00143% of our population died from COVID-19. And if you keep those, it's still only 0.0029%. Either way, we're talking about 1/1000th of a percent or 3/1000ths of a percent of people that have died from this. It's just outrageous. The data is not there to keep this fiasco going. Far more people die in automobile accidents every year than we lose to COVID-19. But you're not mandating that we get rid of cars, are you? I mean, if this is really about our safety, why don't you say nobody can drive a car in Mount Pleasant? I mean, it just defies common sense. My wife's doctor told her.
Sir,
Can I
time's
finish
up,
this
please.
sentence?
Well,
Is
that's
that
a-
2 minutes?
you've got 2:15, 2:20 going, but.
Oh, well, he said trying to keep COVID out with a mask is like trying to keep mosquitoes out with a chain link fence. It makes no sense. And I had 2 nurses that also told me it makes no sense. All of this just makes no sense. Thank you for your time.
Kevin Kinane, 3032 River Vista Way. First of all, why is this an emergency ordinance? You had 61 days, it expired. Now you want to force it through in one council meeting? That's not what emergency ordinances are for. Emergency ordinances are for emergencies, not for lack of planning. If you wanted to make this happen again, hold your 2 notice meetings like every other law that happens. I wondered why this was going on until I saw the news vans outside. The mayor, he hasn't had much good news lately, let's face it. So he needs this issue for his media obsession. What happened with the witch hunt against the town attorneys? Didn't get much good publicity out of that, did we? This so-called mayor has zero understanding of the financial impacts of this power grab on businesses. Zero. He, J. Willie Haney, tries to blame the virus or all damage due to the economy. The virus is the cause of all the damage. He never takes responsibility for the damage he causes. Oh, sure, he cloaks it in a false gentility, but it's so obvious that he only cares about his own press mentions and tweets. For a period of time, Haney lived in a home owned by a family trust fund. He doesn't understand the devastating loss of a business or income on regular folks. He views life through the lens of spoiled entitlement that only a son of privilege enjoys. Does the typical business owner enjoy those luxuries? Of course not. Council, do not allow this nonsense to continue. Businesses are more than capable of keeping people safe. They surely do not need another Haney publicity stunt to add to their already onerous government mandates. They can, will, and have done so already, keeping people safe. Restaurants are trained how to do this. How many of you are? Maybe one. Thank you.
That's pretty wimpy. All right, my name is Keith Blanford, 1742 Central Avenue, Sullivan's Island. Good to see you, sir. Miss Lanning, thank you for trying. So I'm here as a warning. You know, I ran for United States Congress 8 times in a row. I've received more correspondence over the last 6 months than I ever did any time of campaigning. You, the liberals on this board, are completely missing the boat. The silent majority is so angry at you that they're reaching out to me, a former candidate, to try to stop you. Make no mistake, I don't know where you are, but I know you're liberals. You're going to get beat so bad in November that you will be astounded. Republicans in Congress, Senate, and the re-election is done. You can accept that or not. You can believe that or not. But you're not thinking about your future, your political future. All of this stuff is baloney, and people know it, and the truth will be revealed. You know it in your heart. I don't want to be involved. I would rather eat kale raw than be here. But I am here because your citizens don't trust you. They certainly don't trust you, the press. Right? So they're reaching out to me, an old U.S. District 1 candidate who never won. This is absolutely pathetic, and you know it's about the election. You know, I was in the United States Navy, and I saw Syria and Libya and Ukraine. You know what they're doing out there? And you want to stop me on the 2 minutes? A conservative was murdered in Portland. And you know how he got away with it? Because he has a mask on. That's what you're doing. Masks promote unlawfulness. It conceals the identity of the burglar, of the criminal. People in this town don't feel safe. They think somebody can walk into their business, loot them, steal from them, and even murder them. And you're allowing it. You're a disgrace.
Anyone else before we close public comment? Yes, sir, Mr. Jerman.
Good evening. Name is Michael German, 1707 Snowden Road. I live in the Snowden community. I'm not a member of the town of Mount Pleasant. Some interesting things were said here earlier, but what I'm about to say still addresses the mayor and this council. For something a little bit more simpler than this complication, just sewer. I live in a community where you're running sewer lines and you're not allowing people who looks like me to tie into the system after we gave you, Mount Pleasant Water Works, permission to go across our properties to get to Seth and Heather on the other side. But we're not allowed to tie in. Shame on you. Not only that, Mount Pleasant Water Works says, hey, although they gave us permission to come across their property, get to Seth and Heather, let's charge them a higher rate. I pay a higher rate than you in the town for the same service, for that same water line. Now I got sewer line running right across my property again, and you're telling me that in order for me to get sewer, I have to join your town? Ooh, I heard some words that say that that's not American. That sounds more like a dictatorship. And you're doing all of this without even consulting me. The assumptions you make, that that's okay with them. Well, it's not. And it never will be. We need to be at your table. Not only that, you need to really consider what you're doing. It doesn't make sense. All I'm not asking, demanding, is a simple quality of life that you enjoy every day. What's so complicated about that in terms of saying, yes, give me sewer? And another thing, I don't want you to give me anything for nothing. A couple of you councilmen have said in the past that they want something for nothing. That's not true. You're already charging me more money. You're already making it more difficulty. All I want is the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, is to have that same quality of life. We had a bad rain in Snowden the other day, and I noticed that when the street floods, my backyard was flooded and my septic tank overran again. That's all I want. Thank you very much.
Anyone else for public comment? Going once? Oh, coming from the back.
Hi, my name is Lisa Noneman. I live at 2689 Arborcrest Court in Mount Pleasant. I don't have anything pre-written. I am horrible at public speaking. It's taking me everything I can to stand here right now. This mask shaming stuff, it's got to stop. I am retired from the New York City Police Department, as is my husband, retired Police Lieutenant Gregory Noneman, who just coincidentally happens to be in New York right now with his 9/11 doctors as this continues. Not everyone's cut from this cookie mold. Not everyone wants to wear a mask. They don't want to wear a mask. They don't want to wear a mask. I don't really care what anyone else wants to do. My health prevents me from wearing a mask. If you want to wear a mask, go right ahead. That's fine. I am being prevented from walking into establishments because I cannot wear a mask. Do you know, when the buildings fell on 9/11, I'm glad none of you were there to see that. You watch it on TV. You don't know what, you don't have a clue as to what we saw there that day. Do you know that a lot of the people that were told to sit in their chairs at the top of those buildings, they sat there. And guess what? They died. All you people sit back there and tell me I need to wear a mask. You don't know a gosh darn thing about my friggin' health, and nor should you. I don't know about yours, or anyone else's, and I don't want to. I cannot wear a mask. My husband cannot wear a mask, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people in this planet that cannot wear a mask. And 6 months, 2 weeks, I don't know how long from now, but you're going to be finding out how people are going to be dying because they are wearing masks. And I don't want that to be me. I do not want to die. Thank you very much.
Next.
Good afternoon, Perry Rourke, 2004 Brick Kiln Parkway. Every establishment I go in Mount Pleasant, 99% of the people are wearing masks. Most all the employees are wearing masks. So I guess my question is, why now do you need to write another ordinance that puts a criminal penalty on not doing so? And my question here is, you cited in the ordinance, South Carolina law 16-11520, the person must be fined not more than $1,000 or imprisoned not more than 30 days or both. 16-710 must be not fined not more than $100 or imprisoned not more than 30 days. People are already adhering to the mask ordinance that need to. Why do you need to put a criminal penalty? I don't think Chief Ritchie's people need to be answering 911 calls from somebody in the middle of Walmart calling him, telling him, there's somebody with a mask not on in here. That's where our assets are gonna go. We're gonna have police responding to mask calls. And then when they get there, they can't even write them a penalty because all they gotta say is a religious belief or that I have a medical condition, they can't ask them a question. We're gonna waste time and money on this? The ordinance you already put in place, people are abiding by it. I don't see why the need for a criminal penalty. The other thing, Mayor Haney on the news last Wednesday night, you say you're trying to help local business. How is revoking somebody's certificate of occupancy or revoking their business license helping any business if that happens? Because one person might not have a mask on. Like these other people said, the problem you're gonna have is people are gonna be constantly calling the police. Now they know it's a criminal penalty and they can do it. You're gonna have people in Harris Teeter calling the cops because somebody doesn't have a mask on. That's just a complete waste of assets and the town's time, if you ask me. I think Chief Ritchie and his staff probably have a lot better things to be doing than that. And I see 99% of the people adhering to this already. So why add a criminal penalty? That's my first question. Why do we need a criminal penalty added to this ordinance? You want to extend it? Extend it. That's fine. But why add a criminal penalty to it? Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, that will close item number 2, which is public comment. Item 3 is first and final reading of an emergency ordinance requiring persons to wear face coverings in certain circumstances in the town of Mount Pleasant. This is ordinance number 20054. Everyone should have a copy of it. The copy you were given is different from what has been referred to. There is no criminal penalty in the copy that you were given, Mr. Pagliarini, if I'm correct.
That's correct, sir. This is the version that came out of PJL yesterday.
The Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee met yesterday. 4 of us, we voted unanimously not to put that in there. There had been questions when it was brought up 60 days ago about enforceability, and we wanted to see what kind of options people might be comfortable with from that had to do with enforceability, but we decided that we would take that out. Ms. Pagliarini, would you maybe give us the highlights of ordinance number 20054?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, members of council. This is again, the version that was discussed and recommended out of the Police Judicial Committee yesterday, and a few things, of course, have occurred in the last 60 days. First and foremost, the governor has issued an order mandating masks in circumstances, specifically in state buildings, restaurants, and large gatherings. That is in effect. The state of emergency was renewed a few days ago, and those respective states of emergency are valid for 15 days. They have been continuously approved and moved forward since March. The version of the town ordinance, the proposed ordinance before you today came out, as I said, came out of committee yesterday. And a few highlights. First, it would affect food service establishments, retail establishments, as well as the town and public buildings. Those are defined. The decision was made yesterday to recommend approval of an ordinance that did include food service as well as retail establishments, which is different than what the town had enacted 60 days ago. Those food service, face covering establishment, those are defined in the ordinance, as well as retail. The use would be required in enclosed areas in all those areas defined. And section 3, there is a significant list of exemptions. One of the primary changes from this version, or for this version, is item D, that children 12 years old and under are exempt. The remaining exemptions, or the other exemptions, remain the same. And of course, as the mayor stated correctly, that a civil penalty is provided for those persons in violation, and of course, those responsible persons for those businesses that are affected. With that are the highlights and the summary. I'm happy to answer any questions.
This came out of committee, so I guess it does not need a second. It did come from the Police, Judicial, and Legal. However, let's go through the formality. If someone from the committee would make the motion and a second, and then we'll enter discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I have a procedural question.
Sure.
On the published agenda that is still online, it is not this version of the ordinance. So how does that work procedurally? We can just vote on this version even though another version was published?
Yes.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. We're in discussion. Mr. Santos.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just, I wanted to point out again, that's the last time, in the event this fails, we do have a resolution 20061 in effect that was voted on 60 days ago, that it's a resolution encouraging individuals to wear face mask coverings in the town of Mount Pleasant. It doesn't hold them responsible. It doesn't provide for a penalty. It simply strongly encourages people to follow rules, and I think they have been following the rules. If you look at the decline, we keep seeing daily there's more and more of a decline because people are doing it. They're wearing masks. You go into any store, any restaurant, you'll see them wearing masks now. So in the event this fails, which I will be voting against, this resolution will still be in effect. And so citizens will have the opportunity to have a resolution that encourages them, strongly encourages them to wear a mask, but does not hold them responsible and does not force them to have a mask.
Ms. Whitley?
I will be supporting this ordinance because the state DHEC actually issued a statement saying that in areas of South Carolina, coronavirus cases dropped 46% in parts of South Carolina with mask mandates compared to areas without. And the state epidemiologist, Dr. Linda Bell, says this new data shows what we already knew, wearing face masks works. We're strongly supportive of local leaders' initiatives that are centered on protecting the health and well-being of their communities. So I think that while a resolution is great, but it has no weight of law, it has no force, an actual ordinance will, I think, more strongly encourage. And there's plenty of exemptions there for people with medical conditions, and we just added a new exemption for children under the age of 12. But I think that in indoor spaces, wearing a mask helps reduce the spread of the virus.
Does our emergency coordinator have some, not to put you on the spot, do you have some data for us? Yes, sir. I think this would be a good time if you would like to present. This is Amanda Knight, our emergency coordinator whose background is in healthcare emergencies.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Wait for our team to pull up. This is just some statistics that I have been gathering over time. Essentially, here are trends an update on trends that I provided a couple of months ago for you. And so this is from June 1st, and this is zip code data for 29429, 29464, and 29466. And so we can see how our increase in cases have trended over the past couple of months since June 1st through August 30th. We received this information, emergency management receives this information from South Carolina DHEC on a daily basis. It is a rolling 14-day period every day, and so we can see the daily increase, and we'll continue to see that at the zip code level. This is the only zip code level information that we currently receive from DHEC.
Thank you very much. If you'll stay there, we might have some questions. Yes, sir.
Just one more. I know 29464 and 29469 are in Mount Pleasant. 29466, I mean, I see Ondal's included in this. Where else is included? Because those are in unincorporated areas, they're not in the town of Mount Pleasant. So I wanted to make sure that the residents know that that's
Yes.
not in Mount Pleasant. It
Yes.
really shouldn't be up there as far as us dealing with Mount Pleasant, but.
Yes, sir. And so, as you can see, yes, this does include specifically the entire zip code, incorporated and unincorporated, for 429, 464, and 466. You can see, hopefully, that the color of, it's color-coded. So 429 is the yellow, and that one is represented at the bottom of each one of the bars. 464 is blue, which is in the center of each bar, and then 466 is orange and at the top of each bar. So you can see exactly pretty much how much for each day is accounted for by each zip code.
Okay, thank you. But
Yes,
they're
sir.
not all in Mount Pleasant. These are surrounding areas as well. Okay.
Yes, sir. This includes the entire zip code for each of these.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to ask a question?
No, you're not. Yes, ma'am.
I don't think that I'm heard as well with the mask, so I'm going to take it off for a minute. So at the end of last discussion, when we voted on this ordinance over 60 days ago, there were comments read that were about 4 pages long of people, many in the medical community, many not. And those 4 pages were concluded with the announcement that there was 1 inpatient at East Cooper Hospital and none presently at Mount Pleasant Hospital. That, to me, was the only piece of data that really mattered at the time, because the whole point was to flatten the curve. We didn't want to overwhelm our medical system. So 60 days ago, we weren't overwhelming the medical system in Mount Pleasant, and there wasn't much chance that we were going to anytime soon. However, had we discovered that we were heading in that direction, we could have done an emergency meeting, because that's an emergency, and we could have made a decision at that time. The after effects of the social media posts that were done, which I just want everybody to know, I do occasionally go on Nextdoor to inform people about what's coming up, especially if I think there's something that's really important. I've tended away more and more because, boy, it can get really heated just because you're saying, hey, there's going to be a meeting or something. Have not done that in a while, but I used to. I haven't done that, but we've often been accused by people in our community of playing out things on Facebook. I personally don't do that, but I'm just going to tell you what happened after that decision that day. The after effects were multiple tweets and Facebook posts that those that voted in favor of the mask ordinance were listening to science and the medical community, but the rest, which included me, were choosing to listen to the crazies and extremists. I don't consider that strong leadership. I consider that an attempt to appeal to the populist opinion with the possibility of political gain. A big part of the reason I voted against the ordinance last time, and for the resolution that Councilman Santos has already mentioned is still in effect, was to encourage businesses and individuals to follow the CDC guidelines, but give them a choice. The ordinance was unenforceable, period. We already knew we only had 1 code enforcement officer. And I checked yesterday for an update, and for the 60 days of the ordinance, not a single citation was issued in the town of Mount Pleasant. So, ladies and gentlemen, this means that either every single citizen in our community was following this 100%, or it was unenforceable, one or the other. The facts are that we did flatten the curve very effectively, and we do not have a high incidence of cases. Up to Memorial Day weekend, and by the way, I have it right here. I've kept every single day pretty much since the beginning of May and watched the numbers closely. Up to Memorial Day weekend, the numbers in Mount Pleasant were extraordinarily low, less than 130 cases in a 2-month period in a community of almost 92,000 people. They spiked following Memorial Day, not the next day, because it takes a little time for incubation, but they spiked about a week or 2 later, and we can actually see this where we look at early June, and all of a sudden the numbers start to get bigger. That's because we had a lot of people coming from other places, not wearing masks, going to the beach, going to the bars, et cetera, et cetera. We also had, the very next weekend or the weekend after, we had a major protest rally with thousands and thousands of people peacefully protesting. It was very well done. We're very glad they got the opportunity in Mount Pleasant, not the one in Charleston, that was awful, but the one that was handled very well by our Mount Pleasant Police Department and staff was a great opportunity, but they weren't wearing masks, and they were there for 3 hours. Ultimately, we also had July 4th. So if you look at this chart, what you see is after July 4th, the numbers do get a lot lighter. And the fact of the matter that as of Friday, our total number of cases for our zip codes was just under 2,200 for 5.5 months, which is only 2.4% of our population. Now, this is just cases. It's not deaths, and it's not people that had a serious incident. So in the last almost 6 months, if you live in the town of Mount Pleasant, you've had a 97.6% chance of not getting COVID-19. Now, one last thing is we've had many different cases and stories on the news. There has been a lot of politicization, unfortunately, of this. We've had doctors come out against things like mask wearing. We've had doctors come out in favor of therapeutics who get silenced and we're told that they're quacks and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, I actually have two personal stories, and I'll share them real quickly because they're relevant. The first one is, I've been wearing a mask everywhere since the beginning because I'm an elected official, and I wanted to, show people that I'm trying to be sensitive to people's feelings about this. When you go on a plane right now, you have to wear one the whole time, and you can't even have your nose out. So I tend to be one of those people that's really big on your immune system and oxygen. I can tell you in 3 hours of wearing this across country on a plane, I had a splitting headache, which I had no other reason for, and I finally had to turn my head towards the window and sneak my nose out just so I could get over this headache. I also had a family member, very close family member, pass away recently who had an injury that had nothing to do with COVID, but because of COVID, he had to lay in the hospital for 4 months with nobody coming to see him, not his wife, not his sister, me, not anybody else. And I think about all the things, and he's just one person, he happens to be my brother, all the people who have had to suffer at the hands of how some of these things have been treated. And I want to also say something about this shaming thing. I was wearing a mask one day in the grocery store, Harris Teeter, and I ran into somebody I know, and he was wearing a mask. And so we turned to the side on an aisle, and we're looking at each other. This is before we even had an ordinance. We're looking at each other, and we can't really hear each other well. So he takes off his mask, I take off a mask, and we're just talking. We're not talking out, we're talking to each other directly. A lady walks by and literally takes something and like holds it up like this and glares at both of us like, oh my God, because she's walking down the aisle, we might actually send out bad germs at her. Now that was before the ordinance. I've seen a lot of what was described here today. I've seen a lot of people, I even talked to a fellow who I knew had been a stroke victim who cannot wear a mask now because of oxygen content. And he said, you wouldn't believe what it's like. I go out to the grocery store and people constantly point at me, they shame me. He said, it's awful. This has got to stop. The culture of Mount Pleasant needs to match its name, and it always has. And I believe we as the leadership here not only need to vote down this ordinance, just keep the resolution. People can make up their own minds. If they're scared, if they believe this mask helps them, wear it. If they see somebody who's not wearing it, don't point them out, don't shame them, just leave 6 feet between you and that other person. You can walk around them if that's what you want to do. But I believe we need to stop having this attitude that this mask somehow is the magic bullet, because it's not. It does help in some cases. It seems to be there's some evidence. I tried to gather the evidence, by the way, of what Councilman Whitley brought up, because that is in the news. And do you know you can't find it? But what I suspect, since there's about 40 communities that have an ordinance and the rest don't, I suspect that a lot of us, I know for a fact in the 1st District, down towards Hilton Head, mostly have mask ordinances. My guess is it's areas where you've had a lot more traffic, in places out in the country where you don't have a lot of people coming and going. Maybe they didn't do a mask ordinance. You know how much the numbers are up by? 1.4%. So we're hearing it in the news as an argument why we should keep this mask ordinance going indefinitely. But the fact of the matter is, if it went up 1.4% in places where they didn't have very many cases, that shouldn't even be cited. That's not even a correct piece of data to give us. So I'm going to be voting against this. I think we keep this resolution, which does not need action today, we keep that in place, and we let people make their own minds up at this point. If you're worried, you can order online. You can go out and wear a mask. You can avoid other people. I'll bet you most people keep wearing them. Most businesses are still going to require them. And if they want to do that, that's up to those business owners. And I thank you all very much for listening.
If no one else wants to speak, I will. All right, Mr. Chapman and then Mr. Rambo.
I'm going to do like Councilmember Landing, because sometimes I speak a little quiet. I like the idea of continuing the mask ordinance. I would like to suggest a couple of amendments. Probably won't get a second, but I want to at least speak to them, because I think it goes a little farther than I'm willing to go. The first one deals with all retail establishments, and it goes into much greater detail than our current ordinance, because I think our current one deals with grocery stores and pharmacies, which are listed on page 3 and page 4 as retail establishments. The other places like liquor stores, craft, music stores, florists, you don't have to go there. You can choose to. The businesses themselves can put into effect a requirement, but I think it goes beyond where we should be going. The second issue deals on page 4 in terms of exemptions. And I said this the last time, and I'll say it again and again. I know there have been some suggestions that I'm a little zealous on this, but I'm dealing with what the pediatricians have said. 6 years old should be the exemption, not 12 years old. The schools are now requiring, if you go to public school in Charleston County, you got to have a mask on, and that's 6 years old and beyond. So I think the exemption should be 6 and not 12. Those are my, I'd like to make that in the form of a motion.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me get this in the form of a motion, if you will. All right, go ahead.
All right, it's to revise the retail establishments to only deal with grocery stores and pharmacies. And Mr. Rambo asked if I'd separate them, and I'd be glad to. My other, and so I guess we've got to vote on that first. And then I have another.
Give me which reference where that's the place that is referred to that you want to actually alter.
That's on page 4D. Use of face coverings, which it says section 2. It's on page 4. All patrons or visitors are required to wear face coverings while inside the enclosed area of retail establishments. I'm asking that retail establishment really be grocery stores and pharmacies.
So that's section 2, paragraph 1.
Mayor, I would point out, I believe that is also section 1 under definitions.
Section 1, correct.
Right.
Number 6 would be the definition of retail establishment.
Correct.
In section 1, number 6.
And I'm going to have a second one, but I just ask that be voted on first as a proposed amendment.
I'll second that.
And then go to the next one.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. I'll try to restate it. In section 1, number 6, retail establishments, this is definitions, would only be, taking out retail, it would only say grocery and pharmacy. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the same motion in section 2, when you get to paragraph 1, this is towards the top of page 4, it says the same thing. So we have a motion, we have a second, we are in discussion.
Mayor, just as a reminder, the vote on an amendment would be by majority.
By majority, whereas the ordinance itself takes the supermajority.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. O'Rourke.
So maybe it's a question to Howard, maybe it's not, but what is the difference between this ordinance with your changes that allows a person that doesn't have a mask on to simply state it's a health reason, not have to give a reason and not be penalized, than a resolution? That sounds like we have an ordinance here with absolutely no teeth in it. And so we would be passing something that absolutely couldn't be enforced to a resolution that is actually, I think, positive, stating that if this is something you want to do, do it. I don't see the difference in those two things, I guess I'm saying.
I'm yielding to you on that, except that in the governor's orders, he is encouraging municipalities and counties, I guess, to have ordinances regarding mask wearing. That's the difference.
I've got a question for Mr. Rambo from you added in restaurants yesterday at the Police, Judicial, and Legal, and that's what came out. You seconded this motion. Is that going to be to the exclusion of restaurants and bars, or Is that going to follow with a
Yeah, so
different
I'm-
motion, or?
So I've seconded his motion, I should have said for discussion purposes.
Okay.
But, I mean, I think in your motion, it would just basically be what it was, if I'm
Correct.
correct.
That's
Which was pharmacy and grocery, and I will just point out, restaurants are covered under the governor's order. I added that in yesterday because I thought the two should match, but that is his amendment, so.
Anyone else? This is on the amendment only. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hyatt.
So Mr. Chapman's amendment excludes restaurants as well? It sounded like it was just excluding retail, as far as a retail market to be pharmacies and grocery stores, is all you mentioned, but you
What
wanna
I'm
exclude
proposing
restaurants?
is that retail establishments only be, and you can actually leave out the word retail establishment and just say grocery stores and pharmacies, which is like our current ordinance.
So
So that does exclude restaurants?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I don't consider those
is it safe to say, not put words in your mouth or in your amendment, but that your amendment, if your amendment passes, this ordinance would only apply to groceries and pharmacies?
As far as,
At least that's as amended with this amendment?
yes, sir.
So that's what we'd be voting on now.
And all public buildings, you know, I think we're at all public buildings as well. Above.
Well, in order for some of us to try to decide if we would want to support that amendment or not, you said you have other amendments, would you?
Well, I have one other one, but I think you got to vote on this one first. and then-
We do.
And I
but-
only have one other, and that deals with the exemption for children 12 years and under. I'm suggesting 6, because that's what, if you're in a public school, children in a public school have to wear masks.
All right, so that's not a motion yet. So the motion is as was stated. That's what we're in discussion on.
And it's generally what we have right now, the ordinance that just ran out of time.
Right. Any other discussion? All right, if the clerk will call the roll, a yes is to make the amendment, a no is to not make the.
Was there a second?
There was a second, Mr. Rambo. Yeah.
Ms. Hyatt.
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing.
Yes.
Ms. Landing votes yes. Mr. O'Rourke.
No.
Mr. O'Rourke votes no. Mr. Rambo.
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos.
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley.
No.
Ms. Whitley votes no. Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley.
Yes.
Ms. Corley votes yes. Mayor Haney.
No.
Mayor Haney votes no.
So by a 5-4 vote, we have an amendment to amend this to redefine retail to be grocery stores and pharmacies only. It would not apply to other retail or to restaurants. So that's the amendment that passed. Do you want to make your second amendment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I want to recommend, or make a motion to amend Section 3, D as in Delta, to read, for children 6 years old and under, rather than 12 years old and under, only because 6 is the number used by the public schools in South Carolina, or I mean in Charleston County, and it's also a number recommended by pediatricians.
Mr. Pagliarini, on technical point, are we catching, is that the only reference to that, or are we making sure the amendment is
Yes, sir.
sufficient?
That's correct.
Okay. Did everyone hear the proposed amendment? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Mr. Mayor? Yes, sir.
So I offered this change to our ordinance for a few reasons. One, the World Health Organization actually recently updated their guidelines to say that kids 6 and under should not be wearing masks at all, period, under no circumstances. Kids up through age 12, kids from that age through age 12 can wear them, but there's certain guidelines you have to meet, and they're very worried about kids' psychological needs and socially and all of that sort of thing. And so basically, there's no one better to assess whether a child needs to wear a mask than their parent. And we are not their parents. So, I mean, if this amendment passes, I'm out of the whole thing, because I will not subject parents. I will not make parenting decisions for other parents. And I'll also tell you, as one side effect of the ordinance that we passed last time, my 6-year-old daughter, who was in camps through the rec department, drama camps, that sort of thing, she was forced to wear a mask for hours on end. She had horrible rashes on her face. And so I'm just, that is a decision that a parent can make, in my opinion. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? No more discussion? All right, if the clerk would call the roll, a yes vote is to amend the ordinance to make this apply to children 6 and under rather than 12 and under. So a yes vote is to approve the amendment. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Landing.
No.
Ms. Landing votes no. Mr. O'Rourke.
No.
Mr. O'Rourke votes no. Mr. Rambo.
No.
Mr. Rambo votes no. Mr. Santos.
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley. No. Ms. Corley votes no. Ms. Hyatt.
No.
Ms. Hyatt votes no. Mayor Haney.
No.
Mayor Haney votes no.
All right, the amendment fails. Any other proposed amendments to the underlying ordinance, which is now under discussion? So our discussion would be back to the ordinance as amended.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and if you would indulge me for a moment, just for clarification.
Yes.
The amendment, as I understand it, just so I understand the change for retail establishment definition, and that is limited, but also from Section 2, Part 1, the removal of food service establishments, that was removed as well. The only question that I'd like to make sure we're all aware of is the food service. Is any portion of that going to be left in for employees? What we had prior was that was required for employees. Of course, the significant change since that time is the governor's order now covers that. So I just want to make sure, Mayor, that we're understanding the vote correctly.
So tell me where you think we are, what you think it is saying.
Sir, as I understand, Mr. Chapman, that food service establishments were taken out of Section 1, which says patrons. But I would like to make sure that I understood it, that would also include staff. But that's my question.
I'm yielding to the governor's order.
Okay. And that was my understanding, Mayor.
Okay.
And also, as you see in number 1 of Section 2, to include public buildings.
Okay. So we are back to the ordinance as amended. We are in discussion. Anyone who has not yet been recognized to speak would have priority. Okay, Ms. Corley, if you'll bring your microphone down.
Yeah, I will not be voting for this ordinance. As a school leader, you guys have to remember that here in about a week, I'm going to allow students back on campus, and I'm not going to know if they're smiling, if they're upset. I'm not going to know who they are. That thought alone terrifies me. I don't know what we're doing to these kids. It's important for them they have to know that staff cares about them. I have to know how they're feeling. So it doesn't matter what amendment we pass or try to make this what it is not. I think, as some of the speakers said today, this is our time to be leaders and not follow what other entities are doing. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I would like to speak before, since you have spoken. What has happened since our last vote on this 60 days ago? First of all, the South Carolina governor is now urging city mask ordinances, not resolutions, ordinances. And the Forbes article said that there's a 46% lower COVID rate when masks are required. Dozens of cities have enacted mask ordinances. When we did this, there was Greenville, Columbia, Charleston, maybe a couple of others. And we passed ours, and right about the same time, Goose Creek and North Charleston declined to, and very quickly, because of public outcry, their mayors issued by proclamation mask ordinances. So since then, in the last 2 months, let me just read a partial list of some of the municipalities who have figured out, A, mask work, and B, they are enforceable, because if we don't think the town of Mount Pleasant can enforce a mask ordinance, I don't know that we can enforce a sign ordinance or a smoking ordinance or noise ordinances or any of those things. But the town of Andrews has passed a mask ordinance, the town of Arcadia Lakes, Beaufort County, Bluffton, Camden, Casey, Central, Chester, Charleston, Clemson, Charleston County, Columbia, Colleton County, Conway, Florence, Forest Acres, Georgetown, Goose Creek, Greenville, Hilton Head, Horry County, Irmo, James Island, Port Royal, Lake City, Lexington, Marion County, Newberry, North Charleston, the town of North, Orangeburg County, Richland County, Ridgeville, Spartanburg, Somerville, Sumter, St. George, Walterboro, West Columbia, Williamsburg County, Winnsboro, Kiowa, Seabrook, Folly, Isle of Palms, Edisto, and Sullivan's Island. So I want to clear up, too, something that had been said about the COVID deaths. And one of the things that I said last time, and I'm not real appreciative of some of the references or inferences that have been made, but the healthcare providers in this town of our 2 major hospitals came here and asked us to pass a mask ordinance. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've had a loved one with cancer treated at a hospital in the town of Mount Pleasant. And if we can trust our lives to these people, we can trust the advice that they come in here and stand at that podium and give us and say, A, mask work, and B, mask ordinances are good for the public health of the people that we took an oath to serve. This doctor, Dr. David McSwain from the Medical University of South Carolina, put this out today and said, share this, and I got it from Dean Stevens at Channel 4. I have almost never listed a single cause of death on a death certificate. That is not how critical illness works. In fact, any death certificate listing COVID-19 as the only cause of death, as noted for the 6% of death certificates CDC report, is likely insufficient. COVID-19 leads to heart failure, respiratory failure, pneumonia, kidney failure, systematic inflammatory response, sepsis, and numerous other diagnoses, which is what actually causes the death. All of these would be listed on the death certificate of someone who died from COVID-19 infection. People who only have COVID-19 without any additional diagnosis are those that are asymptomatic. People who are critically ill from COVID-19 are critically ill because they developed additional diagnoses. He says, feel free to share this. It is extraordinarily important in times like these to trust expertise. I have been working since March with the One Region Task Force, which is the business leaders of this entire region through the Charleston Regional Development Alliance to get businesses open and to stay open. What is closing businesses now is the virus, not the government. How many restaurants have we seen that had to close because an employee tested positive? How many other places have had to close because someone tested positive? That's not the government closing those businesses, ladies and gentlemen. That's the virus closing those businesses. So if the people who are from the biggest industry and the biggest institutions across this region will sit in a weekly meeting and take this kind of advice from our trusted medical professionals. If someone fell over with a heart attack in here today and EMTs came, you would be transported to one of the hospitals of these local professionals who are telling us that masks work. and that they came here and told us, please pass mask ordinances. We need you to pass mask ordinances. If it's good enough for the business leaders and the medical leaders of this, I will take their advice and I will trust them, because we have a duty to the public health of the town of Mount Pleasant. And I also want to mention that you talk about businesses. You know, in politics, you can either pay for a poll or you can go to the barbershop. And if you listen to what you're told at the barbershop, you'll know what's going on. So when I went to my barber for the first time in 3 months, he sat me in the chair and he said, I want you to know something. 2 days after y'all passed a mask ordinance, and our first one said that people in barbershops had to wear them, his business doubled. And he said mask ordinances work because the public feels safer. He asked people, why are you here? Why did my business double in 2 days? Because people felt safer. So it doesn't hurt businesses, it helps businesses. It helps them very much. The other thing is, and we address this all the time in the One Region Task Force, it's not just the positive rate, it's not just the death rate, it's not just the hospitalizations, it's the quarantine requirements when someone has had an exposure and they have to be quarantined. So there's more. We don't count quarantines. We don't see where that is. All we know is that when there's an exposure in a business and people have to be quarantined, it hurts that business. And as for it being enforceable, if the town of Mount Pleasant with our 92,000 people can't enforce something like this, then maybe we need to call Forest Acres or Arcadia Lakes or the town of North or Williamsburg County and find out how they enforce it. Because I have trust that A, our staff knows how to enforce it and will do it, and B, because of the respect of law, the people of the town of Mount Pleasant will abide by this because their leaders listened to the medical and business professionals and said, we need to do this, and that's why I will be voting in support of this.
Mr. Mayor, I'll call for the vote.
Oh, wait, I'd like to say something.
Not if someone needs to be recognized. Yes, you may be recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to add a couple more things because of all that has been said, and I was one of the early speakers. In the last 3 weeks, again, I told you I follow this every single day, and I have for quite a while. In the last 3 weeks, a lot of towns were mentioned in there, but the ones that are close by us are probably the ones most relevant because we're most likely to interact. I'm not making decisions for North. The other people in here aren't. We're talking, not to criticize that, just to say Isle of Palms, Sullivan's, places that are our neighbors. So Isle of Palms with 4,345 citizens in the last 3 weeks has had a total of 4 cases confirmed. And Sullivan's Island, which has 2,148 people in the last 3 weeks, has had 2 new cases confirmed. And my point is not to go back and try to undo what we did before. That's already over. We did it. If it had a great impact, which it does look like it did, okay, wonderful. We're glad it happened. My question, and why I don't want to support this and am not going to, is what is our primary objective or goal here? We all want our town to be safe for our citizens. Every person up here, we didn't run to cause problems and create health hazards for our community. Are we planning to have an ongoing mask requirement for flu season? That runs pretty much from mid-fall to late winter. Will the citizens in the town of Mount Pleasant be forced to wear a mask indefinitely? Whatever happened to the idea of flattening the curve? We have flattened the curve. We do not have a lot of cases. We also now have a fair amount of people that have developed immunity. We also have a lot of people who had it who are donating their plasma, so we've got a lot better therapeutics. The question is not, did they work, didn't they work? It looks like they did, but do we need it ongoing? And so I just want to add again, I think that talking louder, talking faster doesn't change the message. The fact of the matter is, I believe that if people are concerned and vulnerable at all, they'll wear a mask. And most people will probably keep wearing them, at least for a while. But at some point, and I'm also very concerned about our young people. I cannot believe we're forcing young people, including outdoors in a lot of cases in sports, to wear masks. So, thank you.
Yes, sir. Ms. Rambo.
And I've spoken on the amendment, but I have not spoken on the actual thing. Okay. So yesterday, our education committee received an update from the school district. And Mount Pleasant does not have a single public school that is allowing every student who wants to be in person to return in person, non-charter school. The school board has set COVID rate target numbers for allowing these kids to return. I don't agree with how they're handling that. In my opinion, we have to get these kids back at school. It is paramount to our society to get them back. I say all that because I want folks to know that I really don't like voting for these types of mandates. They're not something that I generally believe in. But as a parent, I just cannot in good conscience vote against something that could potentially help get all of our kids back in school.
Yeah, point of order. Mr. Attorney, well, I called for the vote. Should we not be voting on this issue? Do we continue to talk about it?
No, sir, I'm calling the vote. If it could be appealed to the chair, and then there'd have to be a vote, a supermajority vote to stop debate. That's the procedure.
And if I may, Robert's rules also says if someone who has not spoken requests to be recognized, they get to be recognized before there's a call for the vote. But if he's the last one, that question is already answered. All right, so we are voting on the ordinance as amended. A yes vote is to pass the ordinance. It requires 6 votes, a supermajority. So if the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Rourke.
No.
Mr. O'Rourke votes no. Mr. Rambo.
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos.
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley.
Nope.
Ms. Corley votes no. Ms. Hyatt.
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing.
No.
Ms. Landing votes no. Mayor Haney.
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
So the vote is 5-4. So since there is not a 2/3 majority, the resolution fails, the ordinance fails.
Mayor,
Yes, sir?
I would like to request that we're in a convening mode right now, which does not allow exorbitant clapping and yelling.
True.
So I'd like you to please enforce that.
I will be glad to. And if mine's not heated, we have our Mount Pleasant police here who will see you to the door. So is that the, hang on just a second. Sorry, I flipped pages. So as I understand it, Mr. Pagliarini, then going forward, since the mask ordinance for grocery and pharmacies has expired, we have no mask ordinance in the town of Mount Pleasant at this time.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, so we have no mask ordinance.
But we do have a resolution. It's still in effect.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Item number 4 on the agenda is a resolution to adopt the capital improvement plan for the town of Mount Pleasant. Mr. DeMora.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Unless we go through committee and do it in 2 months, the ordinance, that only requires majority. 2 months meeting. So we can put it on the agenda for PJ.
Okay, there we are. Good afternoon. Capital projects, or CIP, that's the item for discussion on the agenda. Normally, we take this item along with the approval of our budget leading up to the start of our fiscal year, which is July 1. Given the circumstances, if you recall, the decision was made to separate the CIP.
Is your microphone on?
It is, sir, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Having a hard time hearing you.
I know, I don't really notice much of well, there's a slight difference.
Okay.
Yes. Leading up to the beginning of our fiscal year, July 1, the decision was made to separate the CIP from the approval of the budget. 1, we needed a budget, and 2, that because of the decisions being made on our operating budget side, and with a lack of clarity, given COVID, as to funds on the capital side, it just made more sense and to bring the CIP back later when we had some more information, and that is today. And there it is, there's a presentation in front of you. And just a quick recap, The CIP lasts for 5 years. It's a $30 million financial document. The first year is actually the budgeted year, and the remaining years get to continually be addressed by yourselves and make changes as you see fit and as priorities change. Most of the money goes towards moving people and moving water. Transportation, you know all the big transportation projects. There is some final funding going towards Billy Swells Parkway and not the extension of Long Point Road, but the connection down to Rifle Range. So major transportation projects. As the mayor knows through, and as well as other members on Transportation Committee, we're set to go with significant transportation projects next summer. Those will be getting off the ground and under construction, so we're excited about that. Stormwater is a priority, protecting green space, and we list some proposals for how to fund some of these items at the bottom. Next slide. The revenues that support your CIP, hospitality tax, impact fees. There's some infrastructure funds, which tend to be the proceeds left over on the operating side of the budget. Greenbelt, we're looking at a roughly $500,000 a year allocation. And revenue bond proceeds, if you choose to do that. You may find or choose or believe that a different funding mechanism is more appropriate. More revenue impacts on the hospitality tax. We reduced funding. This was along with the adoption of the budget. We reduced funding $750,000. There, we put the public safety training facility on hold because of reductions that we believe are coming. Next slide. So, it's a modest plan. The CIP for the next 5 years is fairly modest. It's $30 million, as I mentioned. It is a good deal less than what we're used to. Unfortunately, don't expect too much more money coming forward, as some of the resources and revenues that we've become accustomed to help us with our capital projects, accommodations taxes and hospitality taxes, are very questionable going forward. But we do have some that help us, and impact fees have helped us. Greenbelt funding, we expect to come in as regular. So overall, it's a modest plan. We have made the changes that you made when adopting the budget. I mentioned those projects a moment ago. Those are incorporated here, and we're asking for your consideration of it. What has come up lately are discussions that, and this is what the slide is referring to, discussions regarding projects that have already been approved in the past. So these projects here that involve tax increment financing funds are projects that were approved before, and you won't find them in the 2021 through 2025 CIP, because that's the proposed new CIP. Instead, there's discussion on how to, or whether to, reallocate funding amongst TIF-covered projects. And there they are in front of you. Memorial Waterfront Park has just under $5 million remaining in TIF. The Port District, which was recently discussed earlier today at Transportation Committee, has 1.3, and we have some track renovations to be done out here at Town Hall. And the bottom one is that major transportation project, important transportation project at the intersection of Patriots Point and Coleman, just down the road here. To take a little liberty, really the discussions up to this point lately, both in Recreation Committee, whether it's come to what to do with the remaining funds at Waterfront Park, or recently at Transportation Committee, involves the top two. The 4.9 at Waterfront Park and the 1.3 in the Port District, really whether you want to move any of that money from one to the other or maintain it just as it is. Next slide. This is what you have right now at Waterfront Park. We'll be asking you today to formally approve us returning that $1.2 million known as BIG grant, the boating infrastructure grant. This is directly attached to the extension of the Waterfront Park Pier project that the bids came in at an unreachable level. So I'm asking you to go ahead, please, and let's return the money. We're not going to be able to reach that project. So that $1.2 million, in my view, needs to be returned. but the park still has an additional 1.5 million remaining in already allocated accommodations tax and hospitality tax funding. Go to the next slide, Marcy. Well, and as we go forward, depending on how your discussions transpire, we can get into as many of these as possible. If you do wish to talk about transportation, additional transportation projects at the Port District, perhaps that's the place to focus in on. And then depending on any decisions that are made there, that would impact money at the waterfront park. We can go back to that. That's all I have, sir.
Let me ask, just in the greater scope of things, in terms of motions and votes, what is staff looking for from us today?
At a minimum, sir, a vote to send back the 1.2 million, the big grant money, voting infrastructure grant money. Approval of a resolution adopting the CIP as we go forward, always knowing that can be changed. And a direction as to funding for the waterfront park project. Whether we're going to go forward with the money that's left there now and try to capture as many of the elements that have been discussed, or do we need to move it into another area? Then the CIP is adopted, and we can go forward and start mobilizing and moving towards additional transportation projects in that area.
Okay, why don't we start with the motion, since we're not going to be building the thing that the boating infrastructure grant was for under any circumstances. Let's get a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So I'll go first on this, since we were on, since this issue came to two committees, police, judicial, and legal, and transportation. Nobody is trying to take money from the park. We've got to finish things at Waterfront Park. However, just because, was it phase 2?
3.
Phase 3, sir.
Which one did not go through?
2.
2 didn't go through.
Well, 3 had multiple phases.
Okay.
No.
The one with the,
We're
the one with
talking-
the boat slips that was going to cost so much money did not go through.
Right, that's 3. That's
That
part
was
of
3A.
Yeah.
3. All right. And so what we were told by the lawyers who specialize this, in that going back to a vote of council in 2017, before those who were elected in 2017 came on, I think it was early 2017, I believe, we identified 5 TIF districts for surplus spending. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. And one of those is the Port District. And so money this is surplus money can be legally moved as long as it stays in those districts. And so what we were trying to do is say, okay, what's the punch list of what needs to be done at the park? Not to negate that money, not to not move forward, but just because one part doesn't cost 4.9 doesn't mean we make up a reason to spend 4.9 if that's not what we need, when we've got roads and drainage and stuff in another TIF district that we need to spend it on. So if we can work in cooperation on that between transportation and recreation, I think we can come up with something that everybody can live with. And I think in the hierarchy of funding, safety and drainage and things like that is at least as important as recreation. So we don't have a proposal on the park, though. We don't know exactly the line item, right? We don't know what that dollar figure would be.
Yes, we do, sir. For both the park as well as the Port District, we have a menu of items along with costs.
Okay.
That would take up more than that 4.9 available. That's what led to my suggestion of, if there are any additions to the Port District in terms of projects that council may feel help to contribute to safety and to movement of trucks.
Right.
That perhaps council may want to consider those, and then any balance would be left for the park. I say that because there's a menu item of park items that you can see in front of you. I mean, we could be here for days debating the merits
Oh, wow.
of agility dog park versus a bocce ball court.
Right.
So maybe the easiest step was to go ahead and look at the transportation projects that are available to you at the port, and then back into the.
Do you have those that can come up? Okay. With cost?
We do. And do we have the map, it may be easier to show. Okay. Is Brad nearby? All right. And Brad, correct me if I steer off course. What is currently being designed, first of all, let me address Section 5. There are several sections laid out. This is the Port District to orient you. And we, some time back, identified transportation improvements out there that could help the entire area. Residential neighborhoods, the port, movement of traffic, the businesses located along and down Wando Park Boulevard. With the budget that we have, we've been working on sections 2 and 3, which is really an intersection realignment for Wando Park Boulevard and Hobcaw Bluff Drive, which is across the street. Right now, they're not aligned. It increases the timing. The idea is to realign the intersection, realign the timing. Everything moves faster, more quickly, and without conflicts in the middle of the
And
road.
that would be the first green section on the right of our screens, right?
Yes, that's the project. Just below is Section 5. That's Hobcaw Bluff Drive and Lone Tree. That was the controversial piece that residents showed up. It might have been a transportation committee.
Yes.
Sir, I can't recall which one. That is a very controversial project. Staff is not recommending anything with that option right now.
Right. And the neighbors are overwhelmingly opposed to that as well.
Exactly. So although you see that on the map and it's listed in the legend, that is not a project that, unless directed by you and council, we have any interest in moving forward at all. Felt it was appropriate to mention that.
And Mayor, if I could interject.
Sure.
What it looks like to me is if you realign that intersection of Wando Park Boulevard with that neighborhood, that might negate the need for that other project to get people from Lone Tree over to a signalized intersection.
Yes, sir. So with the money we have left, we're working on sections 2 and 3. It is possible that with some additional funding, and this is what was discussed, ready for Transportation Committee, there is it's section
1.
Section 1, there it is, Long Point Road, the widening lane extension to Shipping Lane.
And
That
7.
project could be reached, as well as in your, if you're looking at it, upper left corner, Section 7, which is a connection between Wando Park and Shipping Lane. That's the most expensive of the options. All of these, including a potential signal, we know there's some complications with that shown in Section 4. All of those, we believe, can help improve the area aesthetically, the mobility, the safety, and could also promote economic development in that side of the town, which is one of the remaining true economic development sites in town. If these are things that, it was at Transportation Committee, if these are things that council are interested in, we can talk more about it, sort of add up the costs of the options, and then we would know how much we needed from Waterfront Park to be able to satisfy and reach these.
Yes, ma'am.
On the earlier graph that showed the whole list of items for Waterfront Park, and I know this is something that probably Recreation Committee would want to review carefully. Can we go back to that slide? Is that, okay. The base would be really, really a significant cost. Is it necessary to have the base done before you can go into any of those, or can a lot of these things, like for instance, if the splash pad and dog park, which I've heard a lot about, those are two less expensive. They're still, splash pad's still a pretty good expense, but like those two could be accomplished, and I know there's been people that have done presentations on the fitness area. It seems like you could get a lot of little things accomplished, but if that base has to be done first, then that's a non-starter to go anywhere else until that's done. So what is that?
We believe that's a legitimate cost. Naturally, we'll go back and try to reduce it as much as we can. And based on the success we have and the money available, that will let us know what we can do as far as the other elements. But that's pretty solid.
So the only reason I mentioned that is because from what I saw in Transportation Committee earlier, the part that you talked about 1 and 7 were, I think it was it 2.9? 2.6?
I believe so.
2.5, okay. So 2.5 out of the 4.9 leaves 2.4. What about those other two amounts, the 800 and the other that are ATAC? Are those things that can go towards, say, Waterfront Park, or?
They can stay in the park.
So then, okay, so then that 1.5 plus, say, 2.4, you're up to 3.9, right?
Yes,
Is that my math
correct.
good? Yeah, so,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have not even had an opportunity to look at what the consultant has said in recreation yet. We're already talking about taking money away from recreation. I think we're putting the cart in front of the horse. I mean, we really need to take a look at recreation before we start talking about moving money over there. This recreation facility is going to serve the children and the adults of the Mount Pleasant community, 92,000 people. This area that y'all are trying to work with transportation over there is not, and it's going to be helping the truckers that are coming to the port and a lot of the businesses there, and I'm for business, there's no doubt about it. But that money was earmarked for recreation for the kids and for the community here. And if we go in and we start robbing Peter to pay Paul, that facility down there will not be the facility that it should be. That should be a world-class facility right at the tip of our town, and it should be developed according to what we said we were going to do and to what the consultants are recommending. So I'm just saying, I have not seen what the recommendation is yet, and you're already talking about taking money from us. So I would like the recreation to look and see what the consultants say so that we can make a decision on what we think is the best for that recreation complex. And whatever's left over, I have no problems with sending on over to help out with the transportation. But that money was sent for the citizens and the kids of Mount Pleasant to have a park over there, and that's where it should go. Whatever's left, I don't care where you put it.
Yes, sir, Mr. O'Rourke.
Eric, and Marcy, just a couple of questions about contingency. Does each budget contain a contingency? Is there no contingency? How do you deal with unexpected overages?
Likely 10% is an ideal.
So the budgets that we see for the projects probably have a 10% in there.
That's right.
So and it's all speculation right now, but I get nervous looking at the 300,000 for the track. When that comes in at 600,000, I hope we don't then throw that out because it was 100% more than what the original thing was. And I don't have the information, and I think Seaman Whiteside's is the best, but these numbers look low to me. And I worry about, and Mr. Santos, I think, although I agree with you in some ways, there isn't any way you're going to be giving any money back to anything, knowing you. But I mean, no, I didn't mean that mean.
Man, that was cold.
I just meant it's not going to happen. But
That was cold.
No disrespect to you, there's some serious issues on Long Point Road
No, I
with
understand.
those trucks.
Well, we ought to partner up with the port. We ought to partner up since those trucks are coming to and from the port is what I'm saying.
Okay, so this is a budget discussion today. It's a CIP approval discussion today, and that's why I was just interested in like contingencies and making sure the money's there. But look, I'm a rec guy, man. But these are town priorities.
Yeah.
You know, they're priorities for the entire town. But anyway, I don't even think I said anything.
No.
I didn't.
Do I see hands? Yes, Ms. Corley.
I would agree with Gary. I think we're all with you. Like, parks are great, and they would serve a lot of the community, but I'm with Tom, that intersection needs help. It would be nice to be able to, you're talking about one designed lane for trucks to go into? So that would be off of 526, they would just go on their own lane and turn?
It picks up at, I can see which screen to
Wando
look at here.
Park.
Just after Wando Park,
Yeah.
it picks up and allows the truck separation from the rest of the traffic on the roadway down through shipping lane towards the port.
Wow, and that's 1.7 you're budgeting?
That one is, do we have the latest estimate, Brad, do you remember? Roughly $1 million.
So we would just have to sort of figure out how much money, Mayor? Is that what we're being tasked with? Separating that 4.9 million? Or?
I get what the chairman of the Recreation Committee is saying, and I agree. We're not trying to sit here and by process of elimination say the park doesn't need this, and this. But I also, brought to the Transportation Committee and have been over there working with the neighbors and have been over there to see the flooding and have been to the meetings with state ports. And thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, for saying that we need help at Long Point with these trucks.
Yeah.
And there's only going to be more of them. So if we can find a balance, and I don't know what we have to vote on today because we haven't seen the report, like Gary said, from the consultant. We don't know exactly what that is. So we really don't know exactly how much money we're working with. I would like everybody to do this. I've got a file this thick on TIF funds. And I'm not a lawyer and I can't recite it in legalese, but it does say that TIF money is to be spent to where if the government did not spend that money there, property values might decline. And if the intersection at our last remaining economic development, area of our town, the only place we have light industrial and shipping related businesses and 3 good breweries over there, which is why I've tried to name this the Beers and Gears District, but it just hasn't caught on yet. I'm trying. It just hasn't gotten there. I might just have to give it up. But if we prioritize things in the park, if we don't do a bocce ball court at the park, and I'm just picking that one because I could remember that it's on the list, I don't think anyone's going to get injured. If we don't do this intersection with the increase in trucks and stuff on Long Point Road, someone might get injured, and I have a problem with that. Yes, sir, Mr. Randall.
Can you scroll back to the park one, please? I think the way this is being presented, and I don't mean it, but it's like, whoa, all of this stuff that we don't really need, but we kind of want it, would be cool, is $11 million. Well, we're not going to do a gift shop or restaurant edition. We're not going to do a lot of these. They're not even space. I don't even know if there'd be space to do every single aspect of this. So, and then also I have serious questions about the 2.9 million. If you're not going to do, the additional parking was needed because you were going to add a restaurant and all the restaurant seating and all of that. If you're not doing that, you don't have to do as much parking and all of that. So I think the way this is being presented is not accurate. And to echo what Gary said, I think it would be good to have the Recreation Committee take a look at doing, at what elements we could incorporate that are budget-friendly, that finish the park. It looks terrible. You go across the bridge, and there's beautiful park right here, and then this whole unfinished area at the entrance of town, and that's the TIF money that was supposed to be used at that park. So we should finish that park, but not go crazy extravagant. Finish it, put a basketball court, put a dog park, or what. It doesn't even need to be the fanciest of dog parks. Whatever. Add some more parking, but not as much as you have in here. And let's just landscape it, make it look finished. Maybe that's 2.5, 3 million, I don't know. And then we can put the rest into the port road or whatever. I just don't think it needs to, I feel like it's all, we're kind of debating between these two things, and we should be split in the middle.
Right. Mr. Chapman.
Mayor, I think I heard that we need to do a vote, and maybe it's a resolution on the CIP, and maybe come back to the other items. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Demore?
Yes, sir. You can handle all these other TIF options later.
That's what I'm thinking.
Just know that we have the only direction council has had on TIF is to spend 4.9 at the waterfront.
Okay.
Right.
But what we can do is give you a resolution vote
Yes.
on the CIP, and then the Recreation Committee can meet, work with Transportation Committee to come up with a reasonable way to at least get the truck issue resolved. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the CIP. Is it a resolution you need?
Yes.
CIP resolution.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. And just for
Point
clarity.
of information.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I'm voting on.
I'm the same way.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, but he presented it, so let him.
By
let him do it.
Mr. Moore, by us doing this resolution, how does that build in the flexibility for recreation to say, you know, you're right, we don't need a gift shop renovation and restaurant for $4.5 million, but we need other things. And the good thing about this is there's some, you know, as projects go, those are some pretty low-cost projects. They're very within reach. But how does that give us the flexibility to say, yep, we're going to do something on Long Point, and we're going to do this as well?
The discussion we're having right now has nothing to do with the proposed CIP, which is the 5-year outlook.
Got it.
What the reason why I brought it up on the agenda is because there is it's not a conflict, it's not disagreement, but there doesn't appear to be consensus on how to spend the remaining funds, and these are capital projects. So just by having the resolution on the proposed CIP is extremely helpful.
Okay.
That allows us now to mobilize resources down a path to help these projects that are in the current proposed schedule come to fruition. You can always come back to this and where those TIF funds are going to be spent. Just know that on our end of things, until knowing that there is not consensus, that we're on pause.
Okay.
At the staff level until y'all decide, until y'all point the way.
So, but what we heard, there is consensus, is recreation and transportation are going to do our thing. We're going to dig in the numbers, and we're going to come together, right?
Yeah, I mean consensus on the dollars to be spent.
Yes.
Not on your.
I get it.
Having a resolution is great. Passing the resolution would be very helpful.
Yes. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, I think passing the resolution is good and fine, and you need that. But it's going to be, I won't say impossible, but it's going to be pretty hard to get recreation and transportation in a room to agree upon what you have passionate recreation people, passionate transportation people. I feel like it would be good if us as a body could again make this what it is, budgetary, and prioritize our budgets, set the budget, and then let the two committees determine where those funds will go within each of those. But, you know, what makes our committees great is their passion for what they believe in. But like I said to Gary, and it might have been an insult, but he ain't giving any money back. You know, I mean, he's just not going to do it, and it's going to get contentious. It would be good if we went into Gary, made him mad once, and said, "You only get this much." You know, prioritize. But anyway, I'm just making a comment. I should probably shut up.
Well, you know, I see things in here now that I think we could do without. This is the first time I've seen this list.
11 million, Gary.
I know, that's what I'm saying. First time I've seen the list.
Okay.
I haven't had anything presented to me yet.
All right.
So I
Okay.
see things now that I don't have a problem, but we need to meet and look at the list, and then we can come up with something. You know, our recreation committee, we're good, man.
And that's why I suggested
Yeah.
doing the resolution, get that off the table, then the transportation and recreation can maybe meet together and come up, I mean, 1 million out of 11 million should be fairly easy. Should be fairly easy. And I think I'm hearing that from Councilmember Santos, so I'm just trying to move the
that makes
agenda along.
Yes, sir. Ms. Lanning?
I agree, and I was just going to throw out one other little point, and that is when it comes time to decide on actual options for the park, and y'all are talking and discussing, one of the things to keep in mind, there's a number of items here that I bet if you went out into the private sector, you could get corporations to be interested in helping. I mean, I can just imagine a dog park for $162,000. There's a lot of people that would say, wow, I'd love to be able to have such and such name on that dog park or something, you know, just as an example, so.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to pass a resolution for the CIP. Let me ask staff one more time. Passing this is what you need us to do right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we have passed the CIP. We know what the work is to do ahead of us. Item 5, discussion and possible action with regard to the town's current contract for legal representation. This puts it on the agenda, and, well, I'm sorry, we have 5 and 6. They really go together because they are interdependent documents, as last draft that I saw. Discussion and possible action with regard to a new contract for legal services. Let me just ask, and I think I saw Mr. Miller here, we do have new information of a contractual nature for which we could go into executive session to receive that information.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Okay.
I move to go into executive session
I'll second.
Okay, and please give the reasons why.
for the one stated on the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second to go into executive session to receive legal advice with regard to the town's current contract for legal representation and to receive legal advice with regard to a new contract for legal services. Before we vote, upon reconvening, council may take action on any item, including any subsection of any section listed in an executive session agenda or discussed in an executive session during a properly noticed meeting. And one more thing before we vote, we're following the chief in the courtroom 2B. All those in favor of going into executive session for the reasons given, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All in favor of going into executive session for the reasons?
Sorry.
Any opposed? We are in executive session. If everybody will bear with me for a moment, let me get. All right, we have reconvened from executive session. No action was taken, no votes were cast. However, we may have motions to proceed with based on the information that was discussed and the information that was given to council. Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mayor, I have a motion.
All right.
I would like to make a motion that we accept the settlement agreement with HMP and mutual release, and with the changes that were made that were presented to us today in executive session.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, I will ask the clerk to please call the roll. A yes vote is to approve the motion as stated.
Mr. Rambo?
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos?
Aye.
Mr. Santos votes yes. Ms. Whitley?
No.
Ms. Whitley votes no. Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley?
Yes.
Ms. Corley votes yes. Ms. Hyatt?
No.
Ms. Hyatt votes no. Ms. Landing?
Aye.
Ms. Landing votes yes. Mr. O'Rourke?
Yes.
Mr. O'Rourke votes yes. Mayor Heaney?
No.
Mayor Heaney votes no.
The motion passes by a 6-3 vote. Next.
Mr. Mayor, I have another motion, which is to accept the agreement for the new contract for our general counsel through the independent contract agreement for David Pagliarini. Under the agreement, we would also accept that this would include the option to only handle routine work.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and as I understand it, the motion includes only, I want to make sure I heard you right, only routine work. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I think it should say option B to be perfectly correct. And
May
that way there's
All
no
right.
question.
Let me ask the mover of the motion, option B, to define as it was given to us.
Okay, option B as discussed. We didn't have that in writing. That's the reason I
Oh,
didn't
good.
include that, but that's fine if we want to call it option B.
And is your second?
Second.
Second is valid, okay. Any discussion? I have a couple of things that I do want to say. Both of these documents will be public after they are passed, and all the provisions in there, and I just wanted to say a few things because as explained to me legally, it's safer to comment on these things before it is passed. That we hired an outside counsel to help us negotiate a release of a contract for legal services. And then we negotiated with the beneficiary of that before the resolution of those negotiations. And then we hired one of the beneficiaries of that contract. And I have a problem with that. We have a contract with a new law firm that says the town must agree to the terms with the old firm that we voted 6-3 in February to not to fire. No one was fired. There was no controversy like that. We exercised an early exit clause. It had been agreed to in the contract. And I felt like we should have hired an interim law firm. We didn't have enough votes to get that done. That would have given us more time to do this and to continue the interviews. We had 70 people apply for the job of general counsel with the town of Mount Pleasant. We stopped after we interviewed 5. I think we could have continued that. I think it would have spoken well for the town of Mount Pleasant. It also would have given us in one effort exposure to people, since we will be hiring an assistant to the general counsel. So I think that would have done well for us. And I will also be voting against this because I believe in the principle of having an in-house W-2 employee who, and only for the town. It is not a reflection of the person that we're hiring. It's not a reflection on that person's capabilities in any sense of the matter, so please don't mistake it as that. The vote actually in February was to move to in-house, and in fact, we're going back to hiring an outside law firm. So for those reasons, I will not be supporting this motion. Anyone else? All right, if the clerk will call the roll, a vote yes is to accept the contract as the motion says, with only the routine work under option B. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Santos.
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley.
No.
Ms. Whitley votes no. Mr.
Wait.
Chapman.
Stop. I think something's happened. What was the vote again?
What are we voting on?
What are we voting on? We're voting to accept this contract.
We are voting, your motion was to approve and accept the contract with only routine work under option B.
So it was either option A or option B, right?
The motion is only option B.
He has only a motion for option B. There's no motion, we might not have a motion for option A if this fails. I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm not
then I
supposed
have
to say that.
Santos makes sense.
I'm sorry.
We need to continue the vote, and then if someone has to reconsider, they can reconsider their vote.
Voting in favor of it or against?
I mean, I can't ask the parliamentarian because he's the beneficiary of what we're voting on. Please continue the roll call.
Okay. Mr. Chapman?
Aye.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley?
Yes.
Ms. Corley votes yes. Ms. Hyatt?
No.
Ms. Hyatt votes no. Ms. Landing?
Aye.
Ms. Landing votes yes. Mr. O'Rourke?
Yes.
Mr. O'Rourke votes yes. Mr. Rambo?
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mayor Haney?
No.
Mayor Haney votes no.
So by a 5-4 vote, the motion passes, the contract is approved. If you would like, you can undo your vote, but we did need to continue if you would like to change your vote. I mean, the motion is already passed.
I understood this was either going to be A or B, and that's why I wanted.
The motion was for B, and the second was for B. But it passed.
It passed.
Okay, I just didn't want you to feel like you'd been stampeded or, okay. All right. All right, so by a 5-4 vote, the motion passes. That contract will be approved. I believe that concludes our agenda for this special meeting of Town Council. Thank you, everyone. Item number 9 is to adjourn. There being nothing before this body, we stand adjourned.